Hello, hello. I've got some notes here, so I'm going to be looking at my. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for this exciting conversation. This is our first produced event from SDCF since 2020, since pre-pandemic, so we're very excited to be back in person. Thank you all for coming. So before I turn it over to Maria, who is going to be part of this wonderful evening, who is an SDC Executive Board member and an SDCF Board Trustee, as well as a director, choreographer, producer, instructor in her own right. I want to just thank some of our sponsors real quick, which is the New York State Council for the Arts, National Endowment for the Arts, and the Department of Cultural Affairs, all of which make this wonderful event possible and the programming at the foundation. So this will be about 90 minutes max. Restrooms are down the hall. There's snacks in the back if you need them. And there will be time for some question and answers if you have any. So this also is going to be recorded, as you can see from the big camera in the back. So if you would like to revisit this conversation, or if you'd like to share it with others, there will be the opportunity for you all to watch it again in the future. I think that's it. Maria?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi. My name is Maria Torres, and this is the wonderful Christopher Gattelli. I am going to definitely read just a couple of little things, but before we do that, what I wanted to do just to take a look at one of the pieces that, for me, resonated so much. That's when I fell in love with you before we met. First time meeting each other, too. We've only been communicating on a little screen for the last 2.5 years. Okay, so can we take a look at this? This is from the Tonys. Wonderful. So let me read a little bit about you right in front of you. So Christopher Gattelli is a renowned choreographer and director of the field of musical theater, and he has made a significant contributions to the world of dance and has received numerous accolades for his work. And basically, I can go on and on and on, but I'll just name all of the shows that he has done, which is Sunday in the Park with George. Saw that, was fabulous. Fosse, Cats, you started out. We'll talk about that later. You also did Curtains, Crybaby, ALTAR BOYZ, South Pacific, NEWSIES, The King and I, SpongeBob, My Fair Lady. Should I keep going? No. Amazing Grace, The CHER Show, War, Pain, Silence, the musical, Bad Boys, the musical. You see what I'm saying? Okay, that's how we're talking. And it's the first time that we have what we call the Choreographers in Studio, because we really wanted to have an opportunity to be able to talk about the work and the process. And more importantly, the process, not only in theater, but also in film, and how the transition, what do you have to do when you're working from one medium to the other, as well as television. You just shared with me that Schmigadoon is on pause right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Should I have said that out loud? No. We can cut that out. It's okay. Okay, so yeah, so it's amazing your career, and I have the honor to really work to be able to be here, and I start asking you a couple of questions. So the one thing that I want to know is to know about your journey. Can you share your journey from the beginning as a performer to transitioning into choreography? And how did that experience as a dancer shape your choreographic style?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. And I apologize for the hat, but Italian curls and humidity.
We could be the same. Come on with the curls. Come on, it's
okay. Anyway, so thank you for being here. And my specific journey was I studied at a local dance studio outside of Philadelphia, and luckily, being close enough to the city, I grew up doing conventions and competitions and all that kind of stuff. But at a few of them, they have classes that guest teachers would come in and teach, and the guest teacher from Gattelli came to teach at one of the workshops, and he was like, "You have a lot of potential and a lot of technique." He's like, "You should look into our summer program." And he's like, "You're not too far." And I was like, oh, "Okay," So I came here. I was 14, I think, and I auditioned for the summer program when I got in. So I started, my teachers at school let me do half days, so I would do half days in the morning at school, getting all my majors in and getting my credits, and then I would get on the train and go to New York. I would do 3 or 4 classes at Gattelli and just submerge myself in ballet and Horton and Graham and men's class and just everything. It was incredible. And then from there, this was when the studios were in the Minskoff building.
Yes,
And
that's what I
so-
went.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
so,
what I went.
Yeah, and so I just remember we would be in men's class at the bar, and like a chorus line was right there, and I was like, wow, so close, and it's and then in the Minskoff one day they were having auditions for Joan Robbins Broadway, and they were like, oh, everyone come, so I was like, sure, I'll go. So I went, but I got down to the end, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I didn't even see the show at that point. So I went to see the show, and I went, oh my gosh, like. I have all this technique, and it was like watching all of these dancers on stage tell stories through dance, and I was like, oh, and I quickly did like a right turn, and like then just focused on musical theater, because I had done some when I was growing up and whatnot. So, trying to figure out how to cut these short, so I auditioned, and when I graduated from high school, I auditioned for the Radio City Christmas show, and I got it, and I was 17. So I did it, and then I made a deal with my parents. I said, look, let me try my luck in the city for a year, and if not, I'll go to college, but I just wanted to, let me just see what happens. Well, then the associate of the Christmas show also was the associate to Chris Chapman, who did Guys and Dolls, and they said, oh, they had already they cast the Broadway production, but they're like, oh, we're doing a tour, you should come, I think Chris would like you, and I was like, sure. So I went, and I got it, which was amazing, and that literally changed my life. This cast of Guys and Dolls, it was me and Sergio and Andy, and it was like there was like Darren Lee, it was like the group of us, and we were all, I can speak for myself, but I feel like I can speak for them, but we were all inspired by Chris. And he changed my life. There was one day, this is when it all kind of came clear, when we were rehearsing the Crapshooters ballet, and we didn't have a good day. We were off our game, and he got really mad at us, and he said, you all have to go home, he said, and go through every step in the show. And he said, and if you come back and can give me one step that doesn't have intention, I'll give you a dime. I mean, not that part was a joke, but he was like, so I did. I'm an Italian scorpion, so I was like, all right, this is your show. And what I did, and I was like, and it hit me, like, I was like, this is what it is. I was like, this is what. And from that point on, it was like it was so hard to still perform, because if I didn't have intention like Chris gave his work, it was really difficult for me to be in a show because of the care and love that he took. But then I also figured out a way as a dancer to apply that way of thinking. Like, for example, I did Cats, and I wouldn't say that every step in that show had intention, but it was a fun project I gave myself over the course of doing the show, that I gave intention to all of the steps myself. And that was just a kind of fun learning experience in terms of just like creating stories and creating scenarios and creating ideas. And then I got my first taste. I did Bat Boy. It was my first off-Broadway show in 2001. And I'm sorry. This was an important step too. I did, while I was doing Cats, I did a benefit for Broadway Cares for our show. And we didn't win, but Tom Viola said, we loved your sense of humor, we loved this. He's like, will you choreograph our opening number for the Easter Bonnet? I was like, oh,
did you do the Gypsy?
Yeah.
The Gypsy.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and it was the first year the New Amsterdam was open that was renovated. And so we were like, let's go all out. So we did that, and we got in contact with 5 of the original Ziegfeld Follies dancers, and we brought them back. They were all in their 90s. It was amazing. But one of them still danced. Doris Eaton Travis, she still danced. And she brought the house down cold. And Rosie O'Donnell happened to be in the audience that day. And she was like, I want that on our show. This was when her talk show was like, it was all over the place. And so we went on her show, and we did that, and it went well. And Jerry Mitchell was her resident choreographer at the time. And he had to leave to do Full Monty, and they were stuck without a choreographer. And like, right time, right place. Rosie was like, oh, well, what about that other guy that was just on with Doris? He did a great job, and And so I did an audition episode with the Nickelodeon. They had to get slimed, so I did, dance and Rosie getting slimed. But it went well. I did my homework, and I figured out the cameras, and they took me on as resident. It was my first job as a choreographer, and it was just like mind blowing. But that opened doors to things that I, didn't think would happen. And then Bat Boy happened soon after that. And then I had to make a choice. I was performing in Fosse at the time. I was like, okay, do I stay or do I just stop and just focus towards that? And I left Fosse, and I just focused and put all my energy into being behind the table, and I just never left because I love it. First of all, I love it, but it just at that point there was no other option. Like I loved it so much, and then things just kept rolling. And then one show you meet, it's the beautiful thing about this business. You meet different people, and they introduce you to different things and different experiences, and that's kind of like a big snowball that just kind of accumulates and keeps rolling. So.
And I love the fact that you said, we have like similar, there's a lot of things, we'll talk after. But the Minskoff, I mean, I also studied there too, and Sergio, all those guys. And I remember going to Guys and Dolls to watch their performances. But there was one thing that you said to me that I think really resonates, which is what I want to ask you about, how that was transposed into your choreographic work, which is Chris Chapman said to you, intention and really being able to have a high bar about what you're bringing to the movement. So tell me, if you can, my second part of my question is, how did your experiences as a dancer shape your choreographic style? And what inspired you to explore choreography beyond your performing career? So.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes down to story. I mean, really, that's the thing. And I would say, there's part of me that I'm kind of proud of this, but I'm kind of not sure. But I think I wouldn't say I have a particular style. I think. And I feel really proud of that, like that the kind of body of work has been so different, and that's something I love about what I get to do. And like, oh, there's a Viennese waltz in My Fair Lady, great. I don't know how to do that. Let me learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. Or I'm doing a show that needs flamenco dancing. Oh, great. I don't know how to do that. Let me learn how to do that. And so it's like accumulating all of these skills and kind of forms over the years that has been really exciting, because my job isn't necessarily, I don't feel when I'm choreographing, isn't to service myself and to like show off my work. It's to be in kind of direct touch with the director, and my job is to like morph and be a chameleon and be that director's. It's like, how would that director tell the story through dance almost, so that our work feels seamless? And that's always like a nice compliment. If that is said, then that's the biggest compliment, that like the work was seamless, because I never wanted to feel like, oh, a big dance number, now it doesn't feel like that show anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's always to kind of like, and that means like staying on story. So I think that's why and it's, how can I explain this? Yeah, it's basically just leading the story. And even like I say, like even during dance breaks, like when I have to do a dance break, I actually write out the story by hand in pencil or pen, like what the beats are and what the story is, as if I was like writing it in the script. Because then I know if I can stick to that as a choreographer, then I can tell the cast with confidence why they're doing every step and what the story actually is. So, and it's like, it's odd that I have to write it, but it has to for whatever reason come out through my hand.
So that's your process. So that's
yeah. And it's just and it's just and I'm also like, I love a collaborative room though. But if someone has ideas, I will infuse them like into their characters or whatnot. But it's as a starting point, I feel like it's really helpful to me to do that part of the process, and not just like, oh, let's do a kick line because it's a kick line, or let's do because that'll sell this much. It's like I don't kind of operate in that way. It all follows the story of my little script that I kind of added. So that's, I guess, the way it's influenced.
Well, I mean, the choreographers are like the the architects, right, of the musical. I mean, you really are creating the world visual, right, the movement. And so you talked about being the resident choreographer first on what show again?
Rosie.
On Rosie's show, right? So that you started on TV. So let's talk about that process, right? Because that's different than creating for the theater.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it was so interesting because I had to learn quickly like what a Steadicam was, what an overhead shot is, and all of these things. It was luckily in a good way too. It was a small kind of variety show, so it wasn't so overwhelming, luckily. But the first job I had to do for her, I did the one studio shot, and it's like, oh great, we're going to Disney World and we're doing this big number that's going to like be in all the different parks, and it's going to travel around, and it's going to. I was like, oh my god! I was like, oh my god! I was so nervous, but again, it's like you do your homework and you kind of show up and you kind of just make sure you're prepared and as much as you can be, and they kept going well. I did her show for like 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years, and she was great to work with and lovely, but the TV is definitely different. Basically, I mean, I say you're creating for two different boxes, right? Like I feel like when I work in theater, there's a box, and everyone sees everything that's in the box. So as a choreographer, I have to show the audience in the choreography where they should look and where they need to follow the story. So if someone's passing off something during a number and their eye needs to be over here, I have to somehow do something that's going to throw the energy, or at least populate the stage, or however it's going to be, so that the audience knows where to follow the story through the dance. In screen, you're still working at the same box, but if you want to zoom in on that, passing off of that information, or if you want to start on a toe and pan up the body and like reveal a costume reveal or something like that, it's just a different way of using that box, which is, and I like both. I mean, like I really
love them, yeah.
genuinely love to do both. Like it's really cool. But and both have their advantages. I think there's, you know, in TV, for example, like, because it's most recent, like doing Schmigadoon, like it's great because it's a mesh of both worlds. So it's kind of like you have these amazing musical theater performers anyway, so they can do it. You know, they can do all of it in one take if you want them to. But then you could play with things on stage that you can't really do. Like you could get a better reveal for something because someone's going to pop into frame, or you know, like or you can edit so that people can get in place behind something, but then it feels like magic, and you can add energy to numbers that way, and surprises and lifts and whatnot. But in theater, it's I kind of personally I think I like it better, just because there's something about seeing something live that is undeniable, right? If someone's performing something in front of you in that moment, that is sheer talent that person has, that is doing it live. There's no editing, there's no voiceover, there's no singing to a track, lip syncing, out of breath, just, like they are up there doing it. And I think there's something, and maybe that's just from my start of that, but it's just like being a theater, you know, person growing up. But I think there's something about that is just so undeniable. But it is. But in terms of creating, I think they're both fun to create in both genres.
Yeah, absolutely, and also for the process of it, so that we can understand. Because again, you're talking about when theater, you definitely have the audience can go anywhere they want with their eyes. But with the television, it's even more specific than when you work on film. So I know that you work on film, and I want to talk about those different processes, because I will also do the same thing. I work on all the different mediums. And when you're working on television, you either, if you're blocking a scene or creating a scene, it's not only knowing the camera, but it's also making sure the backstory is being able to be understood. So tell us a little bit about, like, I know with Schmigadoon, you did one of your pieces. Tell us about that process.
Gosh, well, that process. What's great is that the showrunner, Cinco, the creator of the show, he has a very specific vision for the show and very clear about his storytelling. He's like, this is what I'm seeing. I mean, he's definitely open, but he has a very clear, you know, directive. And so what we would do is we would get in a studio here, because it was during the pandemic. Both seasons we shot during the pandemic. So I would get people in this. Well, we weren't even in the city the first year. We were rehearsing at my friend's yoga studio in Jersey the first year, because we couldn't even get into a studio here. It was nuts, grateful, but wow, it was so much to deal with. But what we would do is they would give us an allotment of performers, and we would do some previs, which is like I would basically shoot the number in a way that I thought it would be exciting, helpful, help storytelling, focus, whatever it would be for whatever reasons. But I would send along like my edit of what the number would be. We would send it off, and then he would give notes and say, he's like, oh, let's shorten the dance break, or I think we can live in that a little bit more, or actually the camera can't do that in the position it's in because of our set, so maybe you shoot, you know. So then he would give notes and we would reshoot it. And the amazing thing was that, especially for TV, when it's like time is literally money, you know, we went in knowing all the shots, and it was like we were so prepared. We went in, they got it, move on. Like it was really great and really efficient, and it was really helpful to a process. I mean, even more so than like even theater, where you can kind of go around the block a couple times before you land on something. Like it was like to go in with all of that knowledge and all of that info just ready to be done was really, really invaluable.
Which I think also is really important to note, because during the pandemic it changed the course of how we have to work too. And then I think coming back, that's also going to help you. Coming back into the industry is going to help you even more, because now you understand that you can do a lot more things away from the studio. Most of the time, we would show up to a studio and you have like maybe a week, right? That you're doing a number and they want to see it yesterday. right? Nowadays, because of the pandemic, I think it's also given us an opportunity to be able to work in different ways to create the piece, right? Given the time to create that piece. So tell us a little bit about the rehearsal process, right, for that.
I mean, that was, I mean, especially the past season, because it was most recent, I can think it's easier to kind of, but like I had 2.5 weeks to do 16 numbers. It was so much work, and I'm grateful because, I mean, but it's like we had 2 rooms going at one time. I mean, it was literally like, conquer and divide. You 4 in here, you 4 in here. Story, like, let's figure out the story here while you come up with vocabulary. Go in there. Let's fix the story while you come up with, like, it was literally just like.
How many assistants did you have?
I had 8.
You had 8 assistants.
Yeah.
To get it done.
And then they brought in like 10 dancers, I think, or 12 dancers, to add to that, just so they could. With the first season, I only had 8 people for the whole thing. 8 people had to be the entire town. It was kind of hilarious. Those previous tapes are pretty funny, but they were very helpful because they knew it was quite a task. So they did give me more this year, which was lovely, to be able to get it out to them. But we were literally like, it was like 2 or 3 numbers a day. It was just like go, and it's that part is also different than theater, that like you have to really trust and be very okay with the choices you make and proceed with confidence and calm and just, let it go, because I mean, people who've worked with me, they know, like, I will go back into a show and I will change things. I'll be like, ooh, I can make that better. Can you? I'm kind of notorious about that, because I will never stop tinkering. So I can't with TV. So it's kind of my. On the other hand, it's like it's a good lesson for my personality, because you really have to go, this is what it is, and this is what we did, and and you have to be okay with it. And so it's a little more kind of the burners up while you're creating, but in a really good way. You learn to think and work quickly,
right,
in a way that it's like, oh no, I'm very happy with the way that turned out.
And we have a video of Schmigadoon, right, the rehearsal. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
And then you can talk about this. How many drafts did you come up with this one to get that?
To be honest, we kind of settled on that pretty quick.
Oh, good.
Yeah, like it was. I knew I wanted it to be rhythmic, and
so you didn't go home and you wanted, like, let me just tweak this.
Oh, well, I kept thinking until we were on the set. but no, it was pretty. Once we kind of locked into the vocabulary of what it was. But again, like that's also like in terms of, for example, like shooting for TV and like this. Like I specifically went through, as we went through the seasons, the first season with the Golden Age, and then this season with like Fosse and Bennett and all that. Like I also I tried to emulate their style, but also the camera angles. Like those two, she had one married. Like that's from West Side actually. That's from the Mambo. That's like cut. So like I even tried to incorporate camera angles from all of those movies as well, to kind of like that. Again, it's like I feel like I know that, like to have that kind of familiarity. So it was the steps, but also I tried to emulate some of the camera shots as well, in terms of certain visuals that I at least thought would like pop. So
excellent.
Which was really fun.
I love it. No, I love it. And I think I think also one of the other things that I would love for the choreographers who are in the room to get the understanding when you talk about putting it together, because the process, right? The process is the story, then the music, and then you put down the steps, and then you came up with the camera angles, but then storyboarding. What else do you do? Do you know what I mean? Like that would be really cool to find out what your process is.
Yeah, I mean for this it was primarily the pre-viz. I do more storyboarding on film. On film, they'll definitely bring in an artist and come in and like, we can see this happening here and then here, and so then you do get, because for film the scope is usually so much bigger, at least for things I've done, that I can't really do so much of it in the studio. Like it almost has to be a visual given by the who's drafting the storyboards, because they're like, for example, I worked on it's coming out this holiday, the Willy Wonka prequel with Jimmy Chalamet. It's coming out in December. And again, like the scale is just massive. I mean, there are things, but in like the coolest way. It was such a great, again, and I always think of every job as a learning experience, right? I mean, you learn on every single job, and I always pull, like, you learn lessons from everything just because you do, and you hope to retain them. But like that was an amazing project because I had never worked with VFX to that extent. Like I've done it where like, oh, we're erasing lines from a wire, or but that was like, go, like think of whatever you want to do, and it's like, you know, at Disney they call it blue skying it. You know, it's like blue sky it, and and sometimes like for me as creatively that is almost like it almost kind of like bottles me up in a way because like I like at least having a little bit of a confine, but like a little bit of a parameter in place. Because when it's blue sky, it's like
you can do whatever you want.
You do whatever, and at that point, it's kind of like, I mean, there's so many options to do. So that was really an incredible experience because of the kind of blue skying all of it. But the director was so fantastic in terms of he also had a vision though. So he gave me like verbal parameters that at least he kind of knew kind of where it was heading. Like for example, I'm not giving anything away, although it's taped, but there's a number that we did for it. It's kind of like not an aerial ballet necessarily, but we brought Flying by Flame into this beautiful moment where something happens and like there are a bunch of balloons in the zoo that like they grab them and like they end up running on the water and then flying up over the city and land on a roof at the top of a lit galleria and do this beautiful moment together. And I would have never, it was very lovely because he was like, I can't believe what you did with like one line in my script. Because it was basically like, oh, he grabs the balloons and they fly off and then land in town square. And I was like, well, I said after, I was like, well, if we're gonna do it, we should do it. Like,
Absolutely.
When do you get to do this ever? So I was like, let's make it a thing. And so it's like I was really, I hope it looks lovely, but what I see looks lovely, but it was such a nice moment to kind of be there for him in that way and say, actually, there's an opportunity here for dance, for you know, where these two characters can connect and really away from everyone on the ground, like they're up high and they can only have each other and they can really have that connection and let everything else go down there, and it was just a really lovely moment. I'm really kind of proud of it in terms of like what I think I helped add, but even that was like such a crazy, like to have that many options at your fingertips, it was really exciting.
And you told me that you like to write your narratives and storytelling, because I worked on Enchanted, the movie, and that's how you know I worked with John O'Connell. Okay, so every Count of 8 was a major production, right? So we went into the room and we literally had to storyboard it to figure it out ourselves. And I still have all the plans of what John O'Connell, like he basically put every single thing was this massive, huge production. And so, because you're right, I was like, well, do you have your own little storyboard thing that you do yourself to as well? Or is it something that you just write it down so that you can visually be able to see it in your head? You know, that's what that, you know.
Both. I mean, I usually, like, I'll do it, but then I'll use that draft as like a guide that I'll extend off of, if that makes sense. Like, I keep it, I keep all my notes, I keep everything. But,
Yeah, me too.
But yeah.
So do I, I got everything.
Yeah, it usually ends up like branching off from that page, but in a way that it's like I still hold that core kind of story.
And so we talked about Schmigadoon. How let's talk about the capture of Newsies, because do you have that? And talk about a little bit about that process. It's okay. Take a look at it.
So yeah, it's funny. It's now that I have been doing more film, I look back on press things and clips that I used to do, and now I have less hesitancy to speak up and say, oh, actually I saw the dress rehearsal, would you mind pulling out for that shot, because the whole group's dancing there instead of that, you know, there's a build happening that I'm not seeing in the clip that you did. So it's interesting to look back now and on that and think like, oh, I was so like shy to say anything, and now, not, I wouldn't say that I'm like, rah, 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 but I definitely, in terms of like, and I think it's not even about my work, it's protecting the cast in terms of like they're working so hard. I want their hard work to be shown at full value, which they deserve. So.
And that's a really important part. That really is,
Yeah.
because that is definitely also for many reasons, right? One is you want to be able to the audience to enjoy being able to see the entire piece, right? And also all of the performers that are in it. But I think more importantly, speaking up as a choreographer, to have that, to really take ownership over your material, because at the end of the day, right, it stops with you. I know with me in Enchanted, it was John O'Connell, the choreographer. I was the associate, but I basically became his co-choreographer. And I was constantly speaking up because it was really important that you capture all of these moments. If you're not able to speak up on that, what ends up happening is that you wind up having something that could be so beautiful totally get destroyed in 2.5 seconds. And they don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, the directors, they're looking for the choreographer to really come in prepared, which is one of the things, I keep asking about your process. And I'm glad to hear that what you saw there, right? Because it is a contrast from what you're doing, from the work that you're doing right now.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that was, it's 11 years ago now.
But it's still beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. But I think the process behind it, because that's what these choreographers really need to know, to be able to be confident enough, even when you're scared. I think that's the most important, to speak up and protect the work, because that's all that you have. As a choreographer, your work, your body of work is what they get to see. And if they see something that should have been the whole body, and you get to see somebody's feet and not their face, there's a problem, right? Or if there's a scene that you wanted them to be able to focus more on a particular beat of the music, right? Talk about that.
But also, I think that it's like having the confidence to know that you put in all this work into what you've created, and to just protect that time. I mean, we spend so much time, whether it's with our associates or us or skeleton crew or whatever, but to like come up with all of this work, and then to just feel pride and ownership of that, like you've put the work in and you know what it is. But I think, and I never would go up to a director, and say like, oh, you have to get this.
Mm-mm.
I go, hey, just a suggestion. I'm not sure if you caught it, but like they're actually building out. So I never. It's like also the way you say it. I mean, it's also a tact of like, you know what, you don't have to be like rough about it. But it's just like I usually say like, just a suggestion. I saw the first try, and just in case this is happening here, you might want to So I do it in a way that like it's an offering and not a
Right.
directive.
Right.
And then I think when they know that you're open and willing, I think then they are like, they know you're not kind of telling them how to do their job, but in a way that's collaborative. I think then they do listen a little bit more.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because that was the experience for us. I mean, we had insurmountable amount of work on one song, and the director had a vision, but then we had, as our job was tasked, being able to schedule that and being able to put it together in a way that it would be cohesively done without it blowing out the budget, which was insurmountable. Disney, when you work for Disney, you say boo, you get it. We get everything. We had 2,000 performers, right? And being able to, like, my style is a little bit more different. I'm Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban from Brooklyn, so. But he got used to it. The thing is that at the end of the day, we are passionate about the work. And if you come in prepared and you know exactly what the piece needs to be, they're gonna listen. Because I had to speak three different languages to people that didn't know, had never known dance before. I'd never done dance on a film, Latinos that didn't speak English, and then being able to capture all of the dancers from West Side Story who were elderly now, and being able to capture them and give them an homage through this piece, right? So yes, the dialogue suggestion, but sometimes the suggestion could be done in a way that.
Yeah, that's kind. I mean, it's not telling them how to do their job. But I would also say, like, since we're talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing that I also learned a little bit the first season of Schmigadoon, but definitely on Wonka,
Mm-hmm.
was, I mean, this is just a, I throw this out there in case you want to use it, but I over-prepared. I had the option on the previs. I had 40 other options in my back pocket, because I learned quick. Again, not as much with Schmigadoon because we had the previs, so it was pretty much this. But then sometimes there was an oops, and we had to like, oh God, fix, like on the spot, time, ticking, And so you learn how to navigate that. But in Wonka, the director literally was notorious for, like, we would prepare something, we'd tape it, he'd approve it, we'd watch it, we'd go in. He's like, I think I want to get this from overhead. Or I want to get this, actually, or I want, this should happen over here. You know, and it's, and then in those moments, I had lists of options, because once I caught on to this the first day, I was like, oop, that's it. I was like, I cannot be blindsided like this, and especially for the dancers, because they're dancing outside in the cold, on cobblestone, on all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's all these safety things too in place, and things that I know that he wasn't thinking about, but only dancers think about. Like, oh my God, they're gonna land from a leap on that level surface in the middle of cobblestone. Like, I was like, nope. So there's just things like that that just think ahead, think triple, quadruple, tenfold. Like, just think ahead, have options at your fingertips, ready to be malleable. And again, I was always with kindness, but it was like, okay, we're gonna just do a little pivot here, and we're gonna do, remember that combination we learned that was kind of a thing? We're gonna do that thing now. Like, they knew too, like they knew going in. So once we all learned, it was kind of like, let's just have this extra 4/8 ready that we could do facing any direction, because we probably are gonna have to do it. Like, it was one of those things that we all just got used to doing, but again, it just, that learning experience of having to do it and then having it live forever on film and all that kind of stuff, and that pressure. But that I felt like all of that extra preparation paid off, because we did end up using so much of it, and we would have been completely just like blind. I don't know what we would have done. It was really
And it's so
intense.
important, I think, for choreographers to do that and to prepare, but also more importantly, one of the things that you pointed out is to protect the dancers, because you're there also to protect those dancers on site. And even for us, I go back to what we did, at that time when we were in Central Park, and people are dancing inside of the fountain, and they're dancing on concrete, and they're flipping, and they're doing all these crazy things. And you want to make sure that you're really not only over prepared, like what Chris said, because that's why we get along. That's why I love you. And you're a Scorpio too. I'm a Libra, Scorpio. So we're gonna okay. But so there's a thing right there happening. But the thing is that I love when you prepare and you have more than enough. I can't tell you how many times what he's saying has happened to me, and I have to do it with a smile on my face. Like, I put my hand on my hip because I'm a female, and then I'm Puerto Rican, then it's the girl with the big hair. My voice is commanding, but at the end of the day, I make sure, and everybody has a great time, and I'm very respectful, and my jobs always wind up recommending me to another job, because I'm just honest, but also protective, and also prepared. If you're not prepared, then you're not able to really step in to being able to be on those shoes of being known as what you're doing, you know what I mean? And so I think that's a really key and important thing to have.
And it was always, and this was, they never did, but it's always, I don't want them waiting on me. Like, and it was dancers with love, I would say it with love, like, y'all, you're amazing, and I love you, and I appreciate your hard work, but really let's hone this in and really make it great, because I never want them waiting on us or saying, oh, we have to go again because of the dancers. Nope. I was like, that will not ever be on us. And it never was.
Excellent.
We always went in, they were prepared, it was a great group, and it was really, and it was always like, how many more do you have left in you? Just be honest, save it.
Right.
This one probably not gonna take anyway, so just mark it, and they won't know that. How many, but Chris, really, it's because it is about that. If someone's gonna do something on concrete, which so many times on location, you end up, you have to just do it. And I same thing with the boys, I'm watching them, I said to them day one, I was like, this is a lot of your first Broadway show, and this will not be your last Broadway show.
Right.
I went through that show and combed through it, and I was like, you will not do anything that is going to ruin your body, and this show is not worth it. I said, I will go through, and we went through every step. We parse it out. It looks like they're doing a lot. We parse it out. But I was like, nothing is worth that. The body, it's our instrument. I was like, you cannot. It's of utmost importance.
And I want to talk about that, because that's also a big thing. That's for theater. So with NEWSIES, it's such a physically high energy, high octane show. And you said you sparsed it out and you paced it out. But as a choreographer, what is your process when you're working on that kind of show? And you gave advice to the dancers, but Talk little bit about that, because I know that there's choreographers that are completely the opposite, that they don't really care about the human body, and sometimes they push them beyond what they're supposed to, and I do not condone that at all. Trust me, I learned that in Swing on Broadway, where I was dancing, doing four counts of an 8 pirouette on a 3.5-inch heel, and every night I said, you can't do that. There's no way, your body can't do that. What we do, we're like athletes being asked to do an Olympic every 8 shows a week. That's not possible. So talk about how you sparsed out the physicality so that they can take care of their bodies.
I mean, it was kind of just that, like just making sure that there's a little flash every now and then, but it's never with the same person, rarely. It's kind of like with that many dancers, you are able to kind of like widen it and open it up. But I say this on every single show I ever work on, whether it's like heavy dancing like that or whether, it's, again, I say I have an open room, but like when I'm creating, I say like, okay, you pick which kick. I don't care if it's your right leg, left leg. Like I'm not that kind of choreographer that has to be this, because it's not. It's built upon a cast that then has to do it 8 shows a week. And I always say this. I was like, you're out there performing 8 shows a week. I'm not there. I watch with support and love, but like you're the one doing this. So, and I say, please tell me. I want to make this show. I want you to enjoy doing the show. That's why you're doing it. Is because you love to perform. And it shouldn't hurt. And it's funny because they learned early on at the In King in New York that you saw when we did it out in Paper Mill. And that's the thing, that people are so eager and they want to do good too. And I love that part, I really do. But there are a lot of ways to do someone proud. And but they were so young and so eager. And so we were doing King in New York, and at the very end, I had 2 gentlemen next to Cara. And I was like, oh, it'd be great for like one little flasher, like, oh, we could do back tucks. And I was like, you guys, I'm like, you're in tap shoes and you just did a 3.5-minute number. I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. They're like, no, we can do it. We can do it. And I was like, you guys, like, please. And they're like, no, please let us do it. Like, we promise, we'll do it. I was like, okay, but if you, I was like, go ahead, I trust you, and, And then the first night they did it in Paper Mill, they came back, they're like, can we not do that? I said, actually, you have to do it now. No, I didn't. I said that to the group. I said, and that's why. I said, you guys, and I mean this with my heart. Like, this is why. I've been there. I know how much it hurts. It hurts. So, like, this is an example. Don't ever feel like that nothing is not talk aboutable. Like, please, I want you to do the show as long as you want to do it. Like, I don't want you to not because of an injury. And not, like, we never had an injury on that show.
Fantastic.
No one ever called out from an injury. Literally, they didn't. The
That's
only
amazing.
time the PT was for them running up and down the stairs more than the dancing. Like,
That's amazing.
We never had one injury on the show.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That wasn't like that for us. We had so many injuries, because of that. Us and Moving Out were the shows that were heavily danced, and it's that kind of thing where I think that's when you're a working choreographer that started out as a dancer, you have a lot more appreciation for the body, and you understand, which is why I love that you're saying that. Again, I also the fact that one thing is creating as a choreographer, but then you're a very conscientious choreographer, meaning you're really looking at the person and the individual as opposed to just calling them a number, right? Right? Sure. Because sometimes that winds up happening is that you're so focused on the material that you forget that you have real people in the room that feel, So that thing about being able to, what do you call it? Talk about.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. That's it. Talk about it. Love it. That's the one to write down for the books for you guys. So then we talked about those 2. The other thing was the technical elements. So let me see if we touched on that, which was how does choreography in film differ from theater in terms of the visual elements such as set design and cinematography? So do you have input on that?
I do. More so in theater than in the film, because usually there's a production supervisor already off and running. And I will say, that's something that I'm still learning in terms of, with TV and film, I really get it in the theater. I get wing, I get in one, I get all that stuff, I get, when I see a draft of a ground plan, I get it. TV and film is still a little, I think because so much is VFX and so much is what's a removable wall, like because they have to move things for the camera and they have to take things up and off and on and that is still I'm still learning that part of it in terms of anticipating the set and anticipating what we actually have to work with, because sometimes like they'll say it a few times and I'm like sometimes it's just not as clear from what they provide for TV and film as they do in theater. Theater, in my opinion, is much more clear about what you're working with. Where there, it's like, oh, they'll put up a something and you don't really see it until you're rehearsing on it, kind of. So all you have are like sketches of the drawings, but not necessarily like a ground plan like this. So it's a little harder. I'm still like negotiating that, but set design, I have more collaboration, I think, in theater for sure.
And so, and to talk about the theater then, about your process in that and your involvement.
Well, I mean, it's grown as I've kept like chugging along because, again, when I first started, I never wanted to make waves. I was kind of like, oh, I'll work with that, I'll work with that, I'll work with that. But now I think like people will listen when I say, oh, well, there was a story when we did South Pacific on Broadway. And I love her, so I can say this now. But Kathy Zuber did the costumes, and she's brilliant. So we were doing the Follies number that opens the second act on the big trucks, and of course on Broadway they were real trucks. It was massive. We were doing this little tap dance. They were turkeys and pilgrims and whatever. And but she had the women in like 4-inch heels, and I was like, excuse me. I was like, they're already a little high on the truck, and they're also dancing on like plywood. Like everything was real. Like so, like they're dancing on plywood, and they're wearing these big turkey fantails and all this kind of stuff that's already kind of throwing their weight off. Is it possible at all to lower the heel just a bit, because they're saying that they feel a little forward? And she's like, I was like, maybe just a little. She's like, that's what they wore. I'm like, full respect, absolutely, I get that. But I mean, knowing, it's theater and knowing they have to do this 8 times a week, and she's like, that's what they wore. And I was like, wow. And so it was a very hard collaboration to kind of get past that, because she was like very like full stop. But then, like, after we worked together, because we did that together, Women on the Verge, and King and I, and My Fair Lady, and then by then, it's like we were old chums, and I was like, she's like, oh, yes, whatever you want, yes, she's, and so it was like earning that trust. It was like earning that trust from her, because like at first, that South Pacific was one of the bigger things I did coming up, and I just think she was probably like, whatever, But then, like, after our collaborating and like learning how to even talk with her and how to approach her, and like that too, like, I was just telling someone this. I feel like my job is like, it's like 75% therapist and 25% creative.
Yes.
No lie.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
Yes, it is that.
That's the honest truth about like literally what we do is like finding the balance. I mean, this is truly the secret sauce. It's like, it's finding the balance of really getting to do the art that you want to put across in a way that maintains your vision, your passion, your love for the cast and like those who are going to do it, while navigating all of the different personalities that help that come into being.
Yeah.
Like, that is the one thing. I mean, if I say anything, like that is the one thing that I feel is the biggest dance, really, because it's like, it's a costume designer who won't let someone dance in nothing lower than 4-inch heels. It's like, so how do you get around that? And how do you reopen that conversation maybe? Or how do you go back to the cast and say, I tried, without feeling like you're letting them, like it's so much navigating of personalities that I think, and that is something that I feel like I've definitely become better at, in terms of like, I can read someone like that, I can get into their head like that, in terms of like, how to present ideas, how to pitch ideas, how to, ask for a cut in a song, or like whatever it is, that I think is like literally the biggest, I think, takeaway that just of this like
absolutely
years of learning. I think that's the biggest.
Because we're part of a team, and so the team has got everybody is fighting for, not fighting, but ensuring that each department shines, right? So like, when we are looking at the Tonys, we're looking at all the different divisions that are being that are going to be awarded. So obviously when people are putting together their shows, even for TV and film, I find the same thing. Really the same thing. They're all, I mean, everybody is really focused on doing the best job possible. And I think one of the things that you're talking about is personalities, being able to find a way where you're able to communicate your ideas and your information in a way that's not offensive or off-putting. And again, I like to joke a lot, and I always remember people's names. And again, I always start out, listen, you're not gonna understand me. I have a little bit of a lisp, and I'm Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, and I say from Brooklyn. And all of a sudden, because of that, for me, it's different than Chris walking into the room, right? He is this man that automatically will get the women. We are at a point where we're coming in and we're completely being judged. If you're wearing heels, I used to wear 4-inch heels, by the way. Now I wear wedgies that are 5'5". So I still have my heels. But the thing is, you know, and I would dress a certain way, and automatically that is already being judged. So I say to the women and to the self-identifying women that are in the room that you have to be twice even more prepared, because you're automatically going to come into a space where you're dealing with different team members that are very clear about what they want. Their homework is done. You know, like he's saying he's doing his homework, their homework is done. And so they're going to expect you to walk in with your homework, because that's, I know for a fact for me, that's always been the thing where they go, well, can you explain to us what it is that what is it you're doing? And you better be having like 15 different things in the pocket, like Chris said, because it is a thing for the industry, for the commercial, right? When you're dealing with the commercial world, which is what this is about. It's how do we work in this industry, television, film versus theater, but more importantly, preparation. You know, having that preparation, having that dialogue with, you know, because it is psychology, but I think also what I learned was walk into the room prepared and be ready to be able to have a conversation of knowing that person, because that person might be having a bad day. You don't know. You never, you know, you don't know, right?
Sure. And that's why too, and when you have those conversations, I feel like it's like now, I mean, not even just talking about like Kathy, for example, like to be able to not just say, oh, you know, can they not wear the 4-inch heels? I would have, like now what I would have done is I would have done my research back and said, like I would have looked up nurses, I would have looked up what they wore in that period. I would have gone to her with information of my own to support like an idea, and not say, can they not wear them? I'd say, oh, I know they're wearing, I would say, oh, well, an option that I saw, you know, based on what nurses wore, they also wore these shoes, or I would have gone in with a couple more things to have a proper conversation, and not just, can they not do this? So even something like that, on top of, you know, having those collaborations, but also when you have those conversations, having knowledge at your fingertips about what you're about to talk about, so that once it starts coming back at you, you can have a proper conversation in a way that's productive for both, and both can hopefully get something out of it.
That's fantastic. I think, thank you so much. And I think what we want to do now is open it for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Chris, you're more than welcome to. Is there anything else that you would like to add to what our conversation before we do that?
No, I mean, unless there's other things people, I'm an open book, I'll say anything. Whatever can help. Yeah?
Who do you consider to be your biggest mentors throughout your career, or your biggest inspirations?
Oh my gosh, that's really, there's so many. One sitting in the back with a red cap, my other father. No, but I think there are so many people along the way, like my teachers, of course. I mean, I think that's why, like, I would say Chris Chapman, because again, it was that key that unlocked that door that I needed to unlock. Like, I always wonder, like, if I didn't work on that production and I didn't meet him, I wonder, like, I don't know if I would have ever put that together. Maybe I would have, but it was so clear the way he said it, and that kind of like to say to someone, like, go through my show and find something with no intention is so bold and specific in a way that it's so clear. And and I don't know if anyone would have ever, if I would have ever thought of that. And maybe I would still keep dancing on it.
And who's the gentleman in the back that you?
It's my friend Ray DeMattis in the back. I've known him for like 30 years now. He's like, we've come up like together, and like we like confidant, and he's taught me so much, and I've learned so much from him. And so yeah, but it's like people along the way that just kind of gather, and even like my peers and even like performers I work with are inspiring to me. You know, it's kind of comes from everywhere.
How do you choose your team?
My team.
Do you have like people that you always work with that you know they're not gonna let you down, or you change?
For sure. Well, it's a mix of both. I mean, I definitely have. There are associates I have that I've known for, I mean, over 25 years that I literally like have grown up with, and you know, and there's two versions, right? There's like that version where they know me like a book, and they can head me off at a pass if I'm going down the wrong direction, or they know the way that my brain works when I'm working, so they know how to jump on board. But I also, I love to bring someone new onto something because, again, I think it's just part of that student in me being a dancer. You know, it's like I always want to learn. So I want to work with someone new sometimes just because I want to learn from someone else and see the way they work and have that inspire me. You know, so I love bringing people into a process to just kind of learn about them and learn about what they have to offer, and it's just another voice that is exciting and a new voice. So that's why certain projects I will purposefully bring in new people just to kind of shake me up and kind of introduce me to new things. But then I know I have my kind of core pillars that I know I can count on, but and sometimes it's a mix of both, which I also love. You know, sometimes it's I'll have a pillar that okay, Chris is going down, but then this other person will be there to inspire different new things. So, and that will always happen. For example, we were talking about this, but when I was working on the CHER Show, I did at the end of the show, we did a big remix of all of her songs, and I was I was it had been a good run of things, and I was very very happy, and I'm happy, but things were good, and I was this would be nice to give 6 different choreographers an opportunity here, I brought in 6 choreographers, I gave them each a song, and they got credited in the playbill, they each got their first Broadway show, and it was just a really lovely thing that of course we collaborated. It wasn't just go run, but they did run, and then we kind of sculpted this whole thing together, and it was a really special moment because there are these 6 people who I've watched working so hard, and it's you know what, no, here, let's share this, and let's have this, and it was a really kind of lovely thing.
I mean, I absolutely admire that, and we were talking about that because I think that is another reason why also when Danny Barlow and I were talking about doing this with you was I shared that with her. I said, you bring to the table not only the excellence and the in your work ethic, and also all these amazing Broadway shows and the projects that you've won so much on, but more importantly, the integrity and the respect that you have for your other members, and that you're willing to share that space. And that's something that I think all of you should really take into mind, because we both work like that. You'll see me soon. That I'm coming back. No, I did. I am. I'm re-entering the theater circuit because I left for a while. But more importantly, I think during the pandemic, it was one of the things that, how is it that I want to show up and come back? What is it that I wanted to do and contribute? And part of it is doing these kinds of work and working with amazing executive directors like Danny Barlow and Hannah, and also the SDC, our union, which to me was important to have representation and talk about the integrity and the process of the work of choreographers, because we have directors, but directors and choreographers has always been a thing that's been like this, and we needed to bring it together. And that was my thing. My thing is we met on a Zoom before when I just got elected in SDC, when I was voted in to work under the triage of because I came into what I call the triage, emergency, 911, our business is we're dying, all our work went away, what do we do? So for me, I rolled up my sleeves because I'm that kind of person anyway, and everything I do. And then I remember wanting to have a conversation with 3 choreographers. One of them was Chris, the other one was Lauren Lataro, and the other one was Annie Parsons. And we had a really great conversation, and I remember like hitting it off with him because of what he said. And we talked about, the first thing was, how do we take care of our associates? How do we take care of our dancers? And I'm like, I'm with you. That is on my list. That is my list. And the other thing on my list is making sure that choreographers have this equal footing with directors. But more importantly, I think what I loved was that the conversation went back and forth. I said, it's not just us talking about it. It's actually being able to do it. And he did it. You know, he is someone that did that. He actually was able to share his Broadway show with 6 other choreographers. And most recently, another project that I won't mention until you're ready to mention it, that I just had to text him and go, oh my God, that's how you do it. You know, and we still hadn't seen each other in person, but I went, that's change. Change only happens when we take the ownership yourself and you look within and you're able to then really be able to find a way to do what Kristen has done, right? Like with Cher, that's a perfect example. Being able to say at the end of the day, I want to share it with 6 choreographers. That's a lot because producers are going to think a completely different way. But he stood the ground for them to be able to step into that space. So I think that's a really good learning curve. Anybody else has any questions that they want to ask?
Could you talk a little bit about how you lean on your associates and assistants differently in theater versus film versus TV, if at all? It might be the same.
That's a great question. It's mostly similar in that like someone usually might be, like it depends on the workload to be honest, because like for Wonka I had like 9, like I had a room of 9 people and we literally, I saw the video, because it's funny, the other thing about TV and film though is the money is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you get paid necessarily, but like that it's like they would build a set and tear it down in one day that would like I could do 5 Broadway shows with that money. And they like put this thing up. I'm like, oh my god, you know, like, oh. But so they built us. They were like, oh yeah, well, there's gonna be a lot of numbers, and Timmy's gonna need the space, so we're gonna build a dance studio in one of the studios for you. It was like, really? Great. And they built literally built a dance studio in one of these sound stages with a balcony, with like a private rehearsal room, 2 massage therapy rooms. They were like, oh, I was like, oh, 9 is great. We go up. There are 9 desks with phones and rolling chairs and it looked like 9 to 5. It was hilarious. So like we're all at our desks, like ridiculous. But something like that, because it was so mammoth, it's always kind of like divide and conquer and take care of the group and the show and whatnot. So it was kind of like someone on the team was like, everyone contributed to the dance and the numbers and whatnot. But everyone had an additional kind of like, but someone specifically was responsible for like all the COVID stuff. Like anything that came in was COVID. Someone was like, you're dealing with the set department in terms of what blueprints we need and what's getting color coded and what's getting color copied. And like, so everyone had a different responsibility because it's just easier to kind of navigate that. But in terms of just like in terms of theater, it's, it's hard to explain. We all just chip in. Like I just love it's like a no ego room, and it's everyone just chips in and throws stuff in, and no idea is a bad idea, and it's mostly just that. For that I mostly keep the kind of, like the workload and like, because it's like that, because I need it at my fingertips if I just want to make sure that I have it personally, but it does delineate to different things. Where someone may say, okay, we need to learn this style. You go take a few classes in that. I'll go take a few classes in this. We'll come back together, teach each other what we know. So it's different for every show because they're also different.
And it's collaborative. Like it sounds like you're working with people that are there to support your vision, but at the same time you're also giving them an opportunity to contribute as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Anybody else?
Oh, hi. I had a question. You talked a lot about, I found it fascinating, you're talking about the previs where you're sort of almost kind of like pre-directing the dance numbers for when you do the TV and film. I'm curious, with regard to that, and also with theater, like, how does your mind shift as far as when you're the choreographer versus the director / choreographer? You know, like when you're responsible for just the number or you're responsible for the whole piece. Like, does your mind shift as far as the scope of what you're looking at and researching and the people you're managing and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, for sure. I mean, it's, you know, it's interesting with TV and film because it almost is, I don't know if you felt this way,
Yeah.
but to me, it almost is like I'm directing the number, to be
You
honest.
are.
Like they're not, like there's, I mean, I could show you a side by side of like, there was a number in Chicago that we did this year called Talk to Daddy, which was, it was kind of like a love letter to like the Farouk and Rhythm of Life and whatnot. And, you know, they gave notes about other things before, but this one specifically, like we sent the previs and they were like, well, that's what we're doing. I mean, it was very, there were a lot of shots, and I was kind of like, oh, I hope, you know, they're like, we're like, we want this, so we're doing it. And so in a way, so in that sense, like, you kind of do, you're directing, I'm directing those shots, you know, and so, or those numbers. So it's you know.
Yeah, it is.
You do.
It is. I mean, it is. We did that for Enchanted. We were basically like the end scene. So if you look at the movie, you'll see you get the DVD because you'll hear me. I'm in it, and they talk about me, and they'll say a lot of things. But they'll say a lot of things, really good things though. And I ended up getting 9 more films after that because of that one movie. But needless to say, what winds up happening is that what we did is that we are directing the choreography, and you have to manage all these people. And so the end scene, which had over 200, you know, principals, and then another 500 extras, I just went up to the whole team and I said, if we shoot this first, we'll be great. They're like, okay, we're going with what you said. And so, and then the director said, oh no, you're gonna come here. And he sat me down and I directed it with him because I was so clear about what it needed to be, that if whatever the clearest idea in the room, if you're prepared, just know that wins. That is something that I learned with working with Jerry Mitchell. That is something that I worked on every show that I've worked on. It is about the team being able to work as a collective, but more importantly, choreographers have to direct the movement. So you're not just, you know, you're not just going 5, 6, 7, 8 kickball change and that's it. It's not. It's complex. There's a lot of layers. And then on top of that, if you're also a director too, and you talked about the previs, and I want to make sure that you get that answered. So the previs, with that, you used it on what show did you use that for?
Kind of all of them. Mostly the Schmigadoon, both seasons. You know, it goes edited, it goes everything, and you know, I put my stamp on it, and then we'll give notes. But it's basically directing all of the numbers. So that, you know, and then I think for theater it's different because again, like I said, like I really, if I'm just choreographing, I really try to get in the director's head and try to make it seamless and watch their style and watch their tone and, you know, and feel like it's an extension of them. But I'm directing, which has been happening a bit more, it's definitely a little more pressure, but in a way, it's kind of, to be honest, it feels like the same thing to me. Like it feels like as choreographers, we're storytellers already with movement, and so it just feels like, that's why I think so many choreographers end up being director choreographers, because I think it's just inherent in us that we see bigger pictures. We know how to move a lot of people around. We know how to find focus. We know how to forward a story. So it always, every time I see someone like director choreographer, I go, well, it's inevitable, kind of, you know, because we're doing it slightly already. So it is just managing a few more people and having like a say in the set or certain things that you don't normally as much with just being a choreographer. But I love both, to be honest. Like, and I'm doing a lot of direction choreography more. But I don't ever want it to just be that. Like I'll always want to just be a choreographer too, because I love having just that other idea. I love to be able to assist with the vision. Like I love that part of what I get to do. Like I love Bart saying, "Oh, it's going to be this sand dune and this thing." It's, you know, and it's like, yes, let me chip it. Like I love, like there's part of me that will always love that ride. It kind of does get a little lonely when you have to do it all yourself, I have to be honest, because it's like you don't have that other person to like
To
bounce
work with
stuff
it.
off of. I mean, you have your associates and all of that, but that's a given. But at the same time, it's you know, it's a little, it's a lot,
Lovely.
but yeah, but it's fun.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, was it me?
No, yeah, it was you. Yeah.
I was gonna ask like what you hope to receive from like a director or even a producer when working on a project, or like what attracts you to working with a certain creative team or on a certain project.
Usually it's the story. If I find a story that has something to say, or something that I want to be a part of, that it has to say, or their style. Like for example, like when I did SpongeBob with Tina Landau, like I just think she's like amazing, and just like when I say wild, I mean that in terms of like her brain is just like what's up there, you know. And so to like be in a room with her, just like I want to be in that room with her. Like I always say, like I'm so grateful, and I never let a day go by when I don't think about it. And I genuinely am grateful of my path, because I've been co-pilot to some of the most amazing directors that work in theater. I mean, Art, Michael Mayer, you know, Tina, oh my God, Joe Mantello. I mean, just like down the list, and multiple times with a few of them. And it's just to be in those rooms and just watch the way they work, it has been extraordinary. And I also find that's helped shape who I am as a director a lot, in terms of like watching what works and what doesn't work, in terms of like how a director talks to a cast, and how like the respect or lack of respect, or like all those different things that you get to see firsthand and are in the trenches with, like in tech, who is calm, cool, and collected, who is not so calm, cool, and collected, who, you know. And it's like to be able to just like absorb all of that has been such a gift. That has been amazing. And that's why, like, I always, and I say to this room, like, I when I say I run a very open room, like, anyone is always allowed to walk in on a process. I mean, I know it's been more difficult with COVID, but like, if someone wants to come watch a show, like, in rehearsal, or watch part of a process, or watch, like, I always am like, please just call and email me or ask, because, like, yes, come in and watch, like, because it's the only way you get to, like, experience it, really, because, like, you can read and you can learn, but I feel like it's like until you're in those trenches, and you have to, like, we lost 4 days of tech, so you have to like, what happens? What happens? Like, where do you get that back? It's like it's like in it, and it's like you just so I'm always like love like when people come and watch a process, because I just think it's just helpful.
It's wonderful.
You know?
I think it is too, and I want to thank you for today. So let's give a really big hand of applause. I hope you enjoyed this Choreographers Studio. I want to thank Danny Barlow and Hannah and SDCF. If you want to see more of this programming, I really want you to send in your emails and tell your friends about it. And you know, the whole thing about this is being able to bring important conversations and also opportunities for you guys to learn. My name is Maria Torres, and thank you so much. Thank